The enormity of the BJP win and the AAP win in Punjab is still sinking in as far as the opposition parties of India are concerned. There is no doubt that what has happened in these five assembly state elections will have a huge consequence, not just for 2024, but for how politics is conducted in our country. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Let's take you through the aftermath, as it were, for different political parties on the day after the big verdict. We, of course, know that the Aam Aadmi Party swept its jharu through Punjab, but the BJP took all four other states, with the BJP juggernaut literally rolling through despite a series of what should have been anti incumbency challenges. The female voter has also come into her own. There is clear evidence that women have been a key part of the BJP's success story. There is also now a clear vacuum in the opposition. The Congress is decimated, and there will be a natural sort of jousting among the other non BJP parties for their place in the sun. We are here today to decode the mandate and look at the key takeaways from this big election verdict. And let's introduce our panel as we look at the different conclusions that can be drawn as we decode the data. We're joined by BJP leader from Uttar Pradesh, Rita Bahuguna Joshi. It's particularly interesting to have a woman talking about the results when the woman vote, the female vote, has become such a big part of the BJP win in UP. So namaskar, Rita ji. It's good to see you after a long time. We're also joined by MN Parth, who is a journalist who has spent a long time traveling through UP, bringing us field reports and on-the-ground analysis. Welcome back, Parth. Zafar Sareshwala is with us. Zafar Sareshwala has been talking this morning about how the Muslim community will need to engage with the BJP so as to not find itself excluded from the larger political system. As a matter of record, the number of Muslims in the UP assembly has gone up from the last time. So we will take another look at that. And we're also joined by Yamini Iyer, who heads the Center for Policy Research and has a very interesting piece out in the Hindustan Times, actually looking specifically at the female vote. Thank you, everybody. Rita ji, I'll start with you. There's been a lot of talk about how it's not just Hindutva or the consolidation of the Hindu vote, but microeconomics, welfare schemes that were directly targeted at the woman voter, whose turnout was higher in UP this time than the male voter. How much merit do you think there is in this argument? How much credit would you give to the female voter for delivering this big victory to Yogi Adityanath and Prime Minister Modi?
Look, there are very few important takeaways from this election in UP. From 2007 onwards, we see that the people give a very definite mandate. They're not interested in hung assemblies. So whether it was 2007, 12, 17, there was a clear mandate. But earlier, these mandates circled around, combination of castes. Like if the Samajwadi had to go, the BSP was coming. BSP when the Samajwadi was coming. And there were only two leaders in the face of the elections. But after 2014, things changed. When Modi ji came in and he talked about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and he started floating, various schemes for different, for all, despite their community, their caste. So that was the time when people started having faith in leadership and governance. And the next election was the UP in 2017, and thereon rolled on the welfare schemes. So I feel that the myth of caste dominance in political system, electoral system in UP, Bihar, and other such in the heartland was actually shattered with the new kind of politics that started with Mr. Modi. And the down trend of the Congress, the failure of their leadership, the backtracking of Mrs. Gandhi from the political scene, this gave a very free field to the Bharatiya Janata Party to grow. So I feel that two things. One was a specific mandate, clear mandate. It was for Samajwadi, it was for BSP, then for BJP. But then the leadership of Mr. Modi and later of Mr. Yogi, that attracted the confidence of the people. And the way the law and order situation was tackled, the way the central welfare schemes were went to reach the people, the way the UP government tackled the corona, the COVID the COVID times. And
Hmm.
besides that, all the biggest thing was that the women felt very safe under Yogi. They felt the Western UP, BC became very calm. Crime was very badly reduced in that area, and that various schemes for women's safety were brought in. So I feel that Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, then Sukanya, various schemes for women were floated by the government. So gradually, what happened was that across caste lines, and when this free ration was distributed during COVID times for nearly 2 years, so the most effective what would say mechanism for winning this election was that the government reached out to the people when there was a crisis,
Now let
and
me let me
women,
let me
women,
let me
women
add.
as a
Sorry,
whole,
yeah, sorry. Just complete that
women as
sentence
a
about the.
whole,
Yeah.
women as a whole are with the BJP, because the moment I came to know that there's about a little less than 2% increase in the voting of women over men, I knew that this election is going to go swing towards the BJP
and
because
and let me just jump in there. I think on COVID, we will have to have a separate debate on the handling by different state governments. But on the women voter, you're absolutely right that a lot of us who traveled to the ground had people talking, and women in particular talking, of course, about schemes like the free rations, but also about this perception that law and order had in fact increased. Now, Rita ji, explain this to me, and then I'll bring Yamini in. Why did your former colleague, Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, who worked so hard to try and create an identity around the female voter, she spoke a lot about it, she was not able to create any resonance. In fact, even after the elections on Women's Day, she led a march for women. Why did they fail at this emphasis on the woman voter and the BJP succeed? I know there's no comparison in the cadres and the personalities, but even so.
it's very clear. You see, there is a perception amongst the people that the family comes out from event to event, and for them, elections is an event. Coming out 2.5, 3 months before the elections and giving a catchy slogan is not enough. I think they do not have, and what went amongst the message that went amongst the people was that they do not have any cadre, they don't have any definite vote bank, so they are trying to win over the women. Though, of course, the Congress under Mrs. Gandhi had talked a lot about women's empowerment. But when it comes to elections, in the present government is doing enough for women empowerment, whether it is social security or whether it is economic stability, or giving them financial assistance through the SHGs, increasing, the pensions of women were increased from 300 to 1,000 rupees, and there was a lot of increasing the number of women in the police services, creating women desks. So women felt that the times of Yogi were much better than before. So why should they shift when they do not have an alternative? They knew that the Congress cannot come back into power. So the women thought that it was just a catchy slogan. They were attracted to it. But there was one benefit, of course, that with that all the political parties became active and more attention was given to women. A greater attention was given to women. People started promising more and more, the other political parties. But
Yeah.
I think the UP government did enough for women to, to win their confidence. I wouldn't say that they have solved the problems. We have a long way to go in women's empowerment movement. But the fact remains that they got some confidence that yes, this is a party under Modi and Yogi which will deliver.
It's very interesting. It is actually very interesting. And I'll ask Yamini Iyer, the president of CPR, Center for Policy Research, to jump in. She has an excellent piece in the Hindustan Times on this. Yamini, Rita Bahuguna Joshi listed a series of factors, and we may agree or disagree with some of them. But on the female vote, I think you find resonance in this argument that they are a moving sort of factor and spirit behind the big Modi Yogi win in UP. So go ahead.
Absolutely. I think the female voter is emerging as a very, very critical vote base in some senses. And it's not just Modi and Yogi. If you look even back to the days of Jayalalitha, the emergence of the female voter as a critical voter who needs to be nurtured and who stays loyal to the leader is something that Jayalalitha picked up a long while ago. Mamta's victory most recently was also on the back of the female voter. Nitish Kumar has carefully nurtured the female voter from his early days as Chief Minister of Bihar. So it has been a process of evolution over time and has now become a very critical force to reckon with. I think what is important for us to better understand, particularly in the context of the UP election, is that the female voter has been nurtured through the instruments of the schemes. Back in 2017, there was a lot of discussion about Ujwala. In fact, even today, in the run-up to the election in my travels, we met many women talking about the Ujwala scheme, which remains popular, even though today Mehengai has meant that most of those cylinders are just empty and lying there as a showpiece and are not being used. The free ration was certainly very much front and center part of the conversation. One interesting anecdote that I noticed that is different, I think, to what many are talking about on law and order. I found more men talking about female safety and law and order than women. But these are anecdotes. We'll have to wait for serious, rigorous research to really understand it. But I think what is different is it's not just about this amalgamation of schemes that are directed to women. It is also a very deep affective connect that the female voter has with the Prime Minister, with Modi specifically. I did not hear this, again, this is anecdotes, I should specify this again and again. I did not hear this in the context of Yogi, but I did hear this very much in the context of Modi. And I think that affection has also been very strategically and very carefully nurtured. My colleague Nilanjan has sort of built a theoretical framework for trying to understand this. He calls it the politics of Vishwas. I think that's the only social science instrument we have right now to be able to theorize what this is. But there is a deep trust. That trust has been nurtured through the mechanism of direct benefit transfers, which cuts out the intermediary. So it literally is the Prime Minister directly to the beneficiary. And the constant presence of the Prime Minister in the act of receiving that benefit. So as one female voter we spoke with during our travels sort of described it best, as she said, "Jahan bhi jate hain, unka photo hame milta hai." That photo is a very critical reminder of that connection of the Prime Minister with his voter, who is carefully nurturing, the party worker calling up saying, "Come and take your ration." So it's not very different to the Indira Gandhi years. There's still the older women reminiscent of the Indira Gandhi years. We'll talk about it. So it is a combination of a psychological affection combined with a very careful nurturing with welfare benefits as the instrument that has built this vote base as a formidable force.
Can I jump in there just to ask a follow up on that? When you speak about the Prime Minister's image being everywhere, including on the ration bags where Yogi Adityanath and the Prime Minister's images are there, and there you can see the Chief Minister of UP distributing those free rations to women. It's so interesting that what typically journalists would criticize, the sort of personalization of every policy, is actually something that works extremely well in recall and the building of that psychological trust, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that our politicians, that Modi in particular, or the BJP, has recognized this and deploys it very carefully, very strategically, and might I say also very effectively from a purely electoral strategic point of view. I think two important things to recognize here. It is, all of us who've been around in rural India more generally, it's not just rural UP, over the last year, in the context of the economic distress, are quick to pick up on the fact that there is deep distress, very visible distress amongst in rural India that needs to be addressed. And I think one of the interesting things about, if you place this, so it's not like women are not recognizing this distress. It is perhaps also that young men, in times of economic anxiety for young men, the focus often is on jobs. For women, the focus is on getting food onto the plate within the household. And in that sense, the presence of free ration has added into that I have food to place on my table for my children, for my family, for the old that I have to take care of. I think all of this collectively has been able to create and nurture that connection that the female voter has with the Prime Minister. And that's part of the story of his popularity, and the election results that we see. One
Very
point,
interesting. Yeah,
you
sorry, go ahead.
mentioned the Congress, and I can't help myself but say two things here. It's every political party has recognized the value of the female voter. Aam Aadmi Party did it in Delhi. They've done it in Punjab. Congress is not that slow to the take. They recognized it and they try to build a strategy. What I haven't understood is how it is that their strategy did not get good feedback loops to understand what is it that forges the connection. So what is your opposition and how do you build a counter narrative to that? The Congress ladki hu to lad sakti hu was in and of itself an articulation of women's voice, which is important, but it didn't counter the way in which the female voter was responding to, to the prime minister and to the party that they were fighting. So there was no narrative in the fight. It was just something that was
Yeah.
running parallel to something else that was
Yeah,
going on.
yeah, you can't basically separate the welfareism, the microeconomics, the targeted policy from the personality, from the story behind it. Storytelling is intrinsic to politics, and just by front facing a woman candidate, women voters aren't going to start responding in a certain way. Yamini, let me also, if we come out of these pictures now, welcome to the program, Aditi Singh. Aditi used to be with the Congress, quitted, joined the BJP, and has just, if we can introduce her in the box now, has just actually is fresh from the victory in Rai Bareli, in Sonia Gandhi's own territory. Remember, the Congress has drawn blanks in both Rai Bareli and Amethi. So this is there's really a larger message there. And Aditi, just give us a couple of minutes. I want to just get a last comment in from Rita Bahuguna Joshi on the overall picture, and then we'll come to the others. Rita ji, overall, would you say this is Yogi Adityanath's win or Narendra Modi's win? We hear very different feedback from the ground on this. Many people believe that the Prime Minister propelled this victory. It wouldn't have necessarily mattered who the Chief Minister was. I know that you call it a dual engine sarkar, but really putting your political analyst hat on, who's the bigger brand? And is the Chief Minister of UP now displacing Amit Shah as the number two in the ranks of the Sangh Parivar?
Look, there is the popularity of the Prime Minister is going with every passing day. So there is no doubt that the nation has full faith in him. But the question here was the state government and who will lead the state government. There was Yogi Adityanath. And he, over the 5 years, had won the confidence of the people by bringing in all the policies to the ground. So I feel it was a dual, impact. Both the leaders were equally respected, and people felt that this double engine ki sarkar, as they said, as the slogan that we floated, it really worked with the people. Because see, they wanted two things: good governance. It was there from the central government and the UP government. They wanted a good leader. There was Modi and Yogi, which were absolutely acceptable to the people. So I feel on the both the fronts, which were two issues which impact an election, were there with the BJP. The leadership was well recognized, all India, state level, and good governance was there in the both states. And security, as I told you, law and order was one of the biggest issues. Free ration was another very big issue. So I feel that the women, you see, there is peace at home where there is food in the house and when the kitchen is running smoothly. So a woman really worries more about the kitchen running smoothly. So this brought in peace in the families. So I feel that both the leaders are equally credited for this victory.
I know you have to go, so we'll say thank you to you at
Yeah.
this point. We still have
Thank you
Zafar
so
Sarish.
much, Barkha.
Thank you, Rita ji.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good, great to see you
Bye.
after a while. We still have a lot to unpack, and Zafar Bhai and Parth Emen are with us, but I've got to get in Aditi for first comments. And I'm also seeing Neera Chandok, political scientist, joining us. Welcome, ma'am, to the program. Aditi, let me start with you. You are today a BJP leader. Once upon a time, you used to be with Congress. You walked out. You didn't see your future there. And now you have proven your mettle by winning in Sonia Gandhi's home turf. What do you think? What would you identify as the reason that there is trust in the BJP today in UP over all other parties? Talk a little bit about your own election and your own journey first.
Certainly. And Barkha, I can honestly only talk about my own election and my own journey. I'm no one to comment on things outside. And as much as there may have been a BJP wave in Uttar Pradesh, when it came to my own seat or Rai Bareli, you will see that 4 out of the 5 seats, or agar aap 6 manenge, then BJP only managed to win 2 out of 6 seats. So there was a little bit of an undercurrent for Samajwadi Party as far as my district goes, as far as Raebareli is concerned. And it sort of became a very bicameral election in terms of Congress and Baspa were just nowhere. So जब भी दो लोगों का चुनाव होता है, it becomes very, very difficult because it's आर या
Mhm.
पार, right?
Hmm.
And it was absolutely the toughest election I've ever seen, I've ever contested. And, I've seen my dad's elections and I've seen Nagar Palika and all sorts of elections. And only 6 to 8 months back, we went into Pramukhi and the Panchayati elections. But man, I've never seen an election like this. It was, and
What made it so different and difficult? What made it so different and difficult, Aditi?
so firstly, the one thing anyone trying to understand UP elections has to understand is that you cannot take the caste factor out of UP. You absolutely can't. And anyone that says that they can or they have are lying, or they just don't understand the game. Now, on top of the whole caste system and casteism and all of that, people very quickly understood that the other parties are just not even, you know, on the battleground. They're not even players, so vote that is generally divided or generally would also have, shifted to Congress in some places or the BSP in some places, remained completely intact with either of the two parties, depending on wherever their loyalties lied. That made it very, very difficult in terms of, if you talk about my own seat, like you said, um, the castes that were not going with me or didn't want to vote for me or didn't want to vote for BJP, they were all completely with the Samajwadi Party. There was very little vote wastage, you can say. There wasn't a lot of vote that went to the BSP or the Congress Party or the independents or Aam Aadmi Party or whoever else contested. It was completely between these two parties. And any time jab direct mukabla hota hai, it's always a very, very tough election. So that way, I think for me, it was, caste-wise, it was a very, very
Yeah.
tough election to
Now,
manage.
can you talk before I open the debate up, Aditi, about your eventual decision? You're eventually not seeing any future for yourself in the Congress, which is obviously something that was reflecting the sentiment of the UP voter as well.
I think it's just so useless to even talk about the Congress Party at this point. I mean, I don't even see the point of talking about the Congress Party. गढ़ 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 कह के कांग्रेस लाइब्रेरी हमारा गढ़ है, अमेठी हमारा गढ़ है, अब उनको समझ में आ गया क्या है यहाँ. And to be honest, I've
Hmm.
been saying it for a while. Of course, I would say it. One would say कि ये तो बोलेगी, but अब जनता ने अपना जवाब दे दिया. The people have spoken. The people of Raebareli and Amethi have spoken, and you cannot. I mean, something I always maintained is the kind of love and affection and loyalty that they received from Raebareli and Amethi. शायद ही कोई डिस्ट्रिक्ट होगी पूरे इंडिया में,
Hmm.
कोई डिस्ट्रिक्ट होंगे from where they have gotten as much as they have gotten out of Raebareli and Amethi. And to take it so lightly, to take it so for granted, was honestly just disturbing. You know, after all of that, you are never here. You never come in to check in on your people. You only come in around election time. It was actually kind of gross, to be honest, and very, very disturbing, and quite hurtful, to be honest. And I think people just absolutely had it with the party and just this sort of bye bye politics, uh, you know, and that kind of is the reason for their
I
abysmal.
love I love this description of bye bye politics, which gives a whole
अब
whole
यहाँ
different
यही
meaning,
narrative चल
whole
रहा है,
different
कांग्रेस
meaning
का
to the
पंजा मतलब
Neta's
बाय
wave.
बाय.
Okay, Aditi, that's very interesting. You've given us a lot to talk about. Stay here, don't go. Let's open this up. Let's bring in welcoming Neera Chandok, Zafar Sureshwala, and Parth. I'll start with you, Parth. Did you pick up exactly what Aditi is describing? That this was a bipolar contest. The BSP is kind of finished. The Congress is finished. The BSP picks up a sizable vote share compared to the Congress with 1 seat. The Congress picks up 2 seats with its lowest ever vote share in UP. Listening to what Aditi has just described, does that mirror what you were picking up? And it's not about the Congress. I agree with her that to talk about the Congress is irrelevant, but the opposition and what this means for the opposition is not irrelevant. Go ahead, Parth. Sorry, you're on mute. Just unmute yourself. Parth, you're muted at your own end, so you've got to unmute yourself. Okay, let's bring in Zafar Sareshwala in the meantime. Zafar bhai, go ahead. Okay, we can't hear Zafar. We can't hear him as well. It's one of those days, so I'm just going to. Zafar bhai,
Can you
can
hear
you
me?
hear us? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I can hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. See, Barkha, I have been saying this since months that it is very difficult to defeat Yogi. Very difficult. In fact, I've given interviews to a lot of channels 6, 7 months back. And I'm not a cephalogist at all, or nor I know some future. But I've been moving on ground in UP. And, I've done these Talimo Tarbiyat programs, at least in Yogi's tenure also, in about seven or eight cities in UP. And the last one I did in Ayodhya. So I did not find, in fact, after that COVID, where the Ganga ki लाशें and all that, उसके बाद भी एक बात मैंने देखी कि लोगों में अगर नाराजगी भी है तो वो ऐसी है जैसे बाप की बेटे के लिए नाराजगी होती है. There was not at all any नाराजगी of that sort. Second, nobody could come out with a counter narrative. जैसे आप ये औरतों की जो बात करते थे अभी कि भाई कांग्रेस पार्टी ने लड़की हूं, लड़ सकती हूं, ये सब बातें हुई, लेकिन नरेंद्र मोदी साहब ने दे के दिखाया. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आप उस पर डिबेट कर सकते हैं कितना पहुंचा या नहीं पहुंचा. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अनाज पहुंचा लोगों के घरों में. 6,000 रुपए जो जाते थे फार्मर्स को, वो औरत के हाथ में जाता था. टॉयलेट के पैसे मिले लोगों को, घर बनाने के पैसे मिले लोगों को, वो जन धन के टाइम पे अकाउंट बहुत बड़ी तादाद में औरतों के हुए. अच्छा, आपने एक बात देखी होगी, बीजेपी के लोग मुझे पहले भी कहते थे कि हमें कम से कम मुसलमानों के 10 से 12% या 13% वोट चाहिए, और वो पलड़े में बाद में वो 1.5 या 2% का फर्क करेगा. तो एक तरफ इनकी नैरेटिव हिंदुत्व की भी थी, लेकिन आपने देखा होगा, और ये शायद आपके जो लोग ग्राउंड पे थे उन्होंने देखा होगा, कि भारतीय जनता पार्टी का जो माइनॉरिटी फ्रंट है, मैं समझता हूं, मैं देखता हूं कांग्रेस पार्टी को भी, समाजवादी, और इनको भी मैंने देखा है, लेकिन जो माइनॉरिटी फ्रंट जितना स्ट्रांग बीजेपी, और ये पैराडॉक्स है कि बीजेपी की एक सीट कोई मुसलमान को नहीं दी, लेकिन उनका जो माइनॉरिटी फ्रंट जो है वो बाकी सब पार्टियों से ज्यादा स्ट्रांग है, और वो जमीन में लगा हुआ था. अब आप देखिए, ये आपकी एग्जिट पोल 8 या 10% बताते हैं, बीजेपी के लोग जो है वो 10 से 12% बताते हैं. यानी समाजवादी पार्टी के बाद सबसे ज्यादा मुसलमानों का वोट बीजेपी को मिला, कांग्रेस और बीएसपी को नहीं मिला. तो मुसलमानों का एक वो था. और मैं एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट यहां बोलना चाहता हूं कि देवबंद, फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अब देवबंद के अंदर 75,000 मुसलमानों के वोट हैं, और वहां पर एआईएमआईएम असदुद्दीन ओवैसी पार्टी की तरफ से मौलाना उमैर मदनी, यानी ये कह सकता हूं मैं कि 20th सेंचुरी का पूरे सब कॉन्टिनेंट का ग्रेटेस्ट इस्लामिक स्कॉलर का ग्रैंडसन है, और उसको कितने वोट मिले? 3100 वोट मिले सिर्फ. और वहां पर बीजेपी का कैंडिडेट जीता, और वो ये पॉसिबल नहीं है कि उसको
नहीं, तो उससे
मुसलमानों
क्या
का मिला
साबित
हो.
होता है? उससे क्या साबित होता है? अकॉर्डिंग टू यू उससे क्या साबित होता है?
हाँ, मैं क्या ये साबित होता है कि जो औरतों की आपने बात की, वो मुसलमानों की औरतों में भी पहुंच आई है. यानी इनका जो अनाज
So
है,
you are
या
saying
इनका जो
Muslim women, you are saying Muslim women in some communities have also connected with the BJP. Let me
हाँ,
take this
ये
to
तो
Aditi
दिखा
and
रहा है ना,
Yamini, and
10-12%
then I
का
want
जो
to go to
वोट
Neil.
है.
मैं
हाँ,
समझ रही हूँ आप क्या कह रहे
अब
हैं.
मैं एक बात अब मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि एनालिसिस सब कुछ बहुत हो गया. मैं अब आपके जरिए से यूपी के मुसलमानों को यह मैसेज देना चाहता हूं. अब आ गए योगी साहब, अब आप जो है उनके साथ डायरेक्ट कम्युनिकेशन का एक सेटअप तैयार कीजिए. वो आपके भी चीफ मिनिस्टर हैं, आप प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी और उनका और योगी और उनकी सरकार के साथ आप डायरेक्ट कम्युनिकेशन का कोई सिस्टम डेवलप कीजिए. डिवाइड ऑफ पॉलिटिशियंस, यानी सिविल सोसाइटी के लोग आए सामने और अपनी बात रखें. ये हमने गुजरात में 2003 के इलेक्शन के बाद किया था, और मैं समझता हूं वो सबसे बेहतरीन मूव था गुजरात के मुसलमानों का. तो मैं
Okay,
समझता हूं कि अब
Zafar bhai,
जो
you
है,
made two different points. आप एक तरफ कह रहे हैं that the Muslim civil society will need to engage with the elected government of the day, and that is what happened in Gujarat. And you're saying that Muslim women, at least in some communities, did vote more for the BJP than in absolute vote percentage terms voted for the BSP and the Congress. Can I quickly get Aditi and Yamini to come in there, and then I very much want to go to Neera and Parth. Aditi, to you first. You how you've come from a different party, a different, perhaps maybe intuitive way of thinking about pluralism, secularism, religious minorities. When you join a party where the leader frames often his language in terms of 80-20 and so on, as Yogi Adityanath did, how do you, as a young progressive politician today, make your peace with the fact that Muslims, an entire community, nearly 19% of the state, do not feel included in this victory?
You know, I'm an electoral politician. I'm
Yeah.
not a spokesperson. I'm not, all I've ever seen in my entire life is electoral politics. I think, and I've seen many parties, being from UP, सब कुछ देखा है. You know, हर पार्टी को अलग अलग चीजें चुनाव के टाइम बोलते देखा है. हर कैंडिडेट को चुनाव के टाइम अलग अलग चीजें बोलते देखा है. Sometimes very progressive, sometimes really weird. I think when you do politics in a state like UP, especially, or for that matter in our country, so diverse, even pluralism, and even within Hindus, all the caste system and everything that just sort of comes in, things are said. Election ke time pe chahe koi bhi party ho, they will try to garner votes, they will say certain things. uh, it goes without saying. I say it, forget parties, hum pratyashi bhi bolte hain. The kind of things, I mean, I think people that contested against me, the kind of things they said, a lot of times, a lot of the things that are said are not always what a neta ends up doing when they do win. I think Amit Shah ji recently had this very brilliant interview. I kind of remember seeing it during, I was busy in my own election at that time. And he said that चुनाव है, चुनाव के टाइम कुछ चीजें बोलनी पड़ती हैं, कुछ चीजें हम बोलते हैं, कुछ पैतरे होते हैं चुनाव के, but that doesn't mean that that's how we govern. So I think governance essentially is very, very different from just chunavi slogans, which sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. As I
Yeah.
mature as a politician, I've learned that one does do. Every party does have to do to appease certain vote bases for their own good, right? Having said that, if you let it translate into your governance, that's when it's going to come back to haunt you. And
Okay.
of course,
That's
BJP
actually
has
this.
not done it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
5 saal bite, I mean, I think now I can confidently say that there was no danga, there was no fasad, there was no real big disturbance. Honestly, major chunk of the Panchvarshi went in tackling Corona, right? So, my to basically sum up what I'm saying, निचोड़ ये है कि चुनाव के टाइम कुछ चीजें बोली जाती हैं, पक्ष भी बोलता है, विपक्ष भी बोलता है, सत्ता पक्ष भी
Okay.
बोलते हैं,
Okay.
विरोधी भी बोलते हैं.
I'm going to jump
Now
in.
you
I'm just.
govern is basically the real test of you, and
Yeah.
the
Zafar
real
Bhai,
mirror.
just one sentence because the others are waiting. So just one sentence. I know you've got your
One
hand up. One
sentence.
sentence. Yes.
बिल्कुल
Can't hear you, Zafar Bhai. You're on mute.
कैन
Yeah,
यू
now.
मी नाउ?
Yes.
हाँ, योगी साहब की जो सरकार थी, तो मैं गया उनके पास मुसलमानों के मसले लेकर, और उन्होंने सुने. तो वही मैं कहता हूं, एक है सियासी पार्टी इलेक्शन के जमाने में क्या बोलती है, और एक जब कुर्सी पे बैठती है तो क्या करती है. तो मैं ये कह रहा हूं कि अब जब वो कुर्सी पे बैठे हैं, तो मुसलमानों को चाहिए कि उनके साथ डायरेक्ट कम्युनिकेशन का सिस्टम डेवलप करें, क्योंकि अब वो गवर्नमेंट है.
Okay, now let me take this to Yamini. 2 points have come up in this conversation: the difference between election rhetoric and governance, and also the suggestion that women, when you speak about the women voter, that the women voter transcended even religious identity to some degree. That is the argument here, and the data seems to bear out the fact, that yes, these could be sections of Muslim communities. This is not Muslims in general. But Yamini, how do you pick up the threads of this argument? You heard from both Aditi and Zafar Sireshwala.
So on the latter issue first, I think we'll have to parse out the data very carefully before we can make a general comment. I will say from my limited experience of being in the field, the only women who were talking about concerns, vulnerability, bhed bhav, bhaichara were the Muslim women. And they were very careful and very silent when we try to prize open the discussion on voter choices, which I interpreted actually as a very clear sign of vulnerability and something that's deeply worrying, because there seemed to me, in terms of the general chatter in the places I visited, that it's almost an accepted fact that the Muslim is something separate. They will do what they want. Their concerns are theirs, and the rest of the community are dealing with, some of the older differences are getting new classes, new cleavages are emerging in the form, as I said, of the female voter. So I was very careful in my piece to say I'm actually talking about the female Hindu voter, not the Muslim voter. I do not know. I cannot say about their vulnerabilities and experiences. I think this distinction that is being made between electoral rhetoric and governance is an extremely toxic distinction, and one that is trying to legitimize a very polarizing and very frightening discourse that comes up into our political and social lives. It is absolutely wrong to try and legitimize toxic, negative, polarizing, and sharply making sharp vulnerable a certain community far more vulnerable through a particular narrative. That narrative seeps in. We have seen it. And it does seep in into the kind of governance choices. Let's talk about welfare, since that's part of the whole narrative of the female voter. And let's talk about the fact that there were very clear references being made through the election about welfare for Hindus versus the Muslim, as somebody that was grabbing the welfare or taking it away from others. So I don't think these distinctions can be made. I think it's a careful way to pepper over what are really very, very problematic, pernicious tendencies that are seeping into our civil society and our social lives, and our politics is enabling and facilitating it. And the lack of the opposition's ability to articulate a grounded, anchored response to this ideological push is something we should take seriously. Hindutva is at the core. All these other things are strategies to legitimize Hindutva. We need to understand these strategies. That is why the female voter and the strategies to bring the female voter in is important. But we shouldn't lose sight of that core challenge that we confront.
Okay, that actually throws up many different questions, and one of the questions it throws up for the Muslim in UP is, if the BJP shows, as it has now over two elections, that it can win without the voter, then what does that voter, how does that voter feel enfranchised? And that's something we need to actually explore a little bit. Does the voter just, what will happen, how, because in this election you've certainly seen a kind of overwhelming consolidation of the Muslim vote behind the Samajwadi Party. So there has been a more monolithic response perhaps from the Muslim community than is typical, and that too has not been able to influence the outcome. So what does that do to the sense of disenfranchisement is something we need to talk a little bit more about. But let's come back to the opposition. I think Aditi Singh raises a very interesting question. To talk about the Congress is irrelevant. The family pockets had bye-bye politics. The Gandhis weren't there. She calls it gross. And I think, Parth, I was trying to ask you that while the Congress may be irrelevant, what happens to the opposition is not irrelevant for this country, not even for the BJP. What did you pick up among the people? As you said on this program last night, the Samajwadi Party has actually done quite well. It's its best performance. Had it started earlier, had it worked harder, could this have been different, or is the BJP juggernaut just too strong and too smart?
Well, I think it could have surely been different. We'll never know. But I genuinely think if they can get a 13% rise in like 6-8 months of doing some social engineering, they could have genuinely increased it to a bit more if they had actually worked hard over the past 5 years. Having said that, for 2024, many people are sort of making connections to the 2024 elections. Regardless of what had happened in 2022, I don't think it would have been any kind of a mandate or a statement of Narendra Modi's popularity, because he remains popular. And even if Samajwadi Party had won this election, I would have still said it won't probably have an impact on the 2024 elections, unless something drastic happens. Because even the voters who voted for the BJP, for the Samajwadi Party, predominantly the ones that came from the BJP to the Samajwadi Party this time around, they said कि हमको मोदी से कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. So when it comes to the general elections, I still think people are fairly clear where they want to go.
So this
The
is
regional
very interesting
disruption.
you've raised. You're basically saying that where there was anger, it was localized anger. You're not picking up anti-incumbency sentiments against the prime minister or the central government.
Not really.
Yeah. So can you speak then to Prashant Kishore's tweet today? A lot of talk about Prashant Kishore online today, with him saying, I think we have that tweet somewhere. If we can come out of this and
Yeah.
and pull that out, we're talking about how there's a psychological game to suggest that this election is about 2024. He's trying to disassociate. You don't buy that disassociation. You're saying, in fact, if there was any anger against Yogi, it was never with the prime minister.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I picked up from the ground. I mean, even the ones who are sort of indifferent towards Yogi Adityanath believe that we have to vote for him because he's Modi's man, by and large. And frankly, I genuinely believe that people have people vote significantly different when it comes to state and center. We saw that ahead of the 2019 elections as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Voted
that's
like 4 months before general elections, and 4 months later, the BJP ended up sweeping all those states that they had just lost.
yeah.
So it's a clear sign out there from the voters that we look at state elections differently and we look at central elections differently.
And actually, you are not sensing any kind of anger. And I do want to say on record that whatever we may think, I did not agree with Rita Bahuguna Joshi's description of the COVID handling. But when I was traveling through UP, I sensed no anger. There was despair, but it was not rage. And these are two completely different emotions. Parth, you wanted to add to that? Sorry, yeah, I wanted to come to Neeraj so quickly. Parth and Yamini, yeah.
Yeah, the way they neutralized anger again, or rather whatever happened during COVID second wave, a lot of the success also is of the Hindi media, the way they covered Hindi media, and we've got to acknowledge the kind of impact Hindi news channels have in UP and Bihar. Uh, so, of course,
But
the
I also
BJP.
think I also think the prime minister was able to convince voters that this was something that was happening in every country. It was not unique to India, Yamini, and that this kind of groping your way through it, fumbling sometimes, making mistakes, that even countries like America are struggling, and I think the voter bought that. Yamini.
Oh, absolutely. I heard an interesting word that would come up again and again when we talked about COVID and lockdown, because everyone had this clarity of lockdown se pehle and lockdown se ke baad, and spoke about distress. But there was also this word surakshit that kept coming up again and again. Lockdown जरूरी था हमें सुरक्षित रहने के लिए रखने के लिए, और हमें थोड़ा खाना दिया, राशन दिया हमें सुरक्षित रखने के लिए. So it's I think that framing is important. Some of the places I visited didn't seem to have much reporting of COVID, both as a disease or death associated with it. So I would have thought that there would be even more anger about lockdown because there was a lot of discussion on distress. But it sort of translated into a narrative around Surakshit Rakha. And I think that this again goes back to the opposition. Why did the opposition not create political mobilization given the distress?
I mean, where was the opposition during the first wave and the second wave? They were inside their homes. They were not out there on the ground. I just want to, before I come back to Aditi, Neera's been waiting a long time, and we've been having some problems with the connection, but she's up with us now. The state of the opposition, the play for the opposition, questions now being raised about why the Congress did not contest under Akhilesh Yadav, under Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal. Mamata Banerjee has repeated that appeal today. That's why I'm bringing it up again. She's saying even now we can come together. Neeraj Chandok, your takeaway from this verdict? Sorry, we need. Ma'am, you're muted at your end. Ma'am, you're muted. You need to unmute yourself. If the guests mute yourselves
Okay.
at
Can
your
you hear
end,
me
yeah,
now?
yes, we can.
I
Yes,
just
go
want to
ahead.
clarify a couple of concepts that have been liberally used, and I'm surprised that politicians do not know the difference between these concepts. First of all, what you saw in UP was not welfareism, it was not democracy. This is the East Asian model where the government keeps its people happy by handing out, what Marx calls a mess of postage, and puts the prime minister's photograph on the bags. Now, excuse me, the money came from the taxpayer. It didn't come out of his personal wealth. I don't even think he has personal wealth. RSS people normally don't. This is social policy from above. And I was amazed when Zafar Bhai spoke about civil society. Kahan hai civil society? Gujarat mein ya UP mein? Sabhi to jail mein hai. The entire civil society leadership is in jail. Where is the civil society that can negotiate? So what the East Asian model, ranging from Singapore to North Korea, is that you give the people a handful of grain and you take away their civil and political rights, you put their intermediaries in jail, and you deny them freedom of expression. That is the model of social policy. It's not welfareism. Welfareism has something to do
Okay,
with
but when you
concern
say it's
for
not
people.
democracy, fair
I
enough on the
wanted to, it's
welfareism, but
not
when you say it's not
democratic
democracy,
because you
it is the
can't
same.
take away social rights. And I'm amazed this young woman will not even contextualize her win in the atmosphere of hate and fear that has been built up in UP by this double-barreled engine. All
May I
these
ask a
repeating.
question?
It's
Yeah, ma'am.
shocking. How can you decontextualize Yogi ne de diya?
But the
Okay,
same
that's one.
election,
That's
the same
second
election. I have
part.
a question for you, ma'am. I have a question for you, and you can answer it in your second part. The same election has delivered the Samajwadi Party's best performance ever. So, if we are going to smear the entire electoral process, then the people, the Samajwadi Party having done well, is also then something that should be challenged because it's the same process.
But the mandal, I think, has run its course. I think the Hindu vote has not only consolidated itself against the minorities, the Hindu vote has consolidated itself against caste. And I wouldn't be surprised if this government abolishes reservations. That will be its next step, autocratic step.
So
Because they are against, RSS is against reservations. Or the whole idea of one unified Hindu nation, for God's sake, let us be and let us relate to the nation in our own way. And
I have one more question for you, and then I'll open up
yes,
what you've said because, of course, it is.
I want to just suggest, Barkha, that this whole discourse is being completely decontextualized and usage of new politics of Modi. This is the East Asian model. He admires them. He admires
ma'am,
Singapore.
with all the sort of respect for your expertise and your seniority, my question to you is this: elections is what this country has. It's the mechanism through which we choose and throw out our governments. We have no other method in any democracy anywhere in the world. If we start questioning the integrity of the electoral process, what are we left with? This is the
I'm not
way to
questioning the
mediate our democracy.
integrity. No, I'm not questioning the integrity of the electoral process. I
Okay.
am arguing that elections are one part of democracy. Democracy is about respecting civil and political rights. It is about delivering to the people the preconditions of a dignified life. It is not only about election. How many criminals have won elections? They've just said how they exposed in Uttarakhand their criminal backgrounds. So please don't denigrate and demote democracy to elections. That is my suggestion as
Okay,
a
let me thank you, ma'am. Let me just take this and a lot of the other points made. I'll start with you, Aditi. Yamini Iyer also made the point that you can't conveniently separate what is said on the campaign and what is done in governance. It's too convenient. I think she used the word toxic a leap. And the fact is that what you say somewhere reflects your way of thinking or what you think is acceptable, and that the boundaries of acceptable have been sort of changing and they change every day, is what we're seeing. My question to you again is this: when you as a young person contest the elections for yourself, what do you think has been the tipping point for your own victory? Let's talk about you. I know you can't talk about everybody else. You're here to talk about your electoral win in Raebareli, so go ahead.
In terms of, firstly, I completely agree with in terms of just the kind of criminals that come into the electoral fold, and absolutely I agree with that one point that elections aren't just like the only picture of democracy is bigger than that and a much larger issue than that. But having said that, I mean, I think ma'am called it the East Asian model or whatnot. What is wrong with that? You're talking about taxpayers' money. We agree that it's taxpayers' money. There's no denying that it's not taxpayers' money, but it's about how one chooses to use that money. I remember when I first moved back to India and Samajwadi Party was in power at that time in UP. Does one not remember those ridiculous Saifai Mahotsavs? वो किसका पैसा था? Whose money was that? When you're getting baggiya from the UK and Germany and you're getting in all these actors and actresses that are charging you crores per hour to perform for this one family, That is what is ridiculous. So if you're going to call this, like, I don't know what, the South Asian model or the East Asian model or whatever, I think then, you know what, kudos to the East Asian model. We wish we were like Singapore. I think there's nothing, I mean, I just don't even understand what is wrong with that. It is the taxpayers'
Harika,
money which is being
One minute,
used,
ma'am. 1 minute. Let me just
instead
have a
of
say. Let me just have a say.
going into some ridiculous mahotsavs and whatnot, whatever they got up to, or Mayawati ka wo park ban rahe hain bade bade stone ke patharon se kam this is, at least it's going directly into beneficiaries' accounts for the first time. They're getting ration, they're getting houses, they're getting toilets. That is exactly what a welfare state is supposed to do, and we're a welfare state. What are we doing wrong? What is so ridiculous
Okay,
or disgusting
can I
about
ask you a
it?
supplementary? And Ms. Chandok, I'll come back to you. I just want everybody's reactions to this. Aditi, if I can ask you a follow-up question. I think you make a
Yeah.
good point about how money has been used by all governments. And that is actually what I wanted to say to Neera Chandok, that the failure to deepen our democracy institutionally, the fact that you can't take always a free media for granted, is because a series of parties, for example, have trampled on it in different states historically and so on. But my question to you is this, Aditi. When Zafar Sareshwala says Muslim civil society should reach out and engage with Yogi Adityanath, the chief minister, should that initiative not be of the governments? Why should that initiative come from the people? Should it not come? Because the prime minister says that once you win, he's the prime minister for all people. Similarly, the chief minister now is the chief minister for all people, including those who did not vote for him. What do you think the BJP should do to make the Muslim voter
I
feel?
don't understand what, like, I don't understand what the confusion is. It's the government. It's open. It's a free franchise. You go in and you vote for who you want. Did BJP bar Muslim people for voting for itself? I mean, it's, I don't understand the point. You know, you have MLAs.
No, I'm asking what should
I
happen
may be a
now. I'm
BJP
asking what should
MLA.
happen now. I'm not at all going into the electoral process. The result is out
Yeah.
there. What should happen now? The
But
election
what's
is over.
happening now? Look, the government's job is to provide equal opportunities and equal behavior for everyone, which is what it's doing. I mean, if you talk about absolutely any of the schemes, be it, since we've all been talking about schemes, during this interview, be it the ration or be it the, housing, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, or be it the toilets, or be it absolutely any of the schemes that we've come up with, it's been completely unbiased. And to be very honest, that's also been, kind of the reason behind such a big win. I
Yeah.
know a lot of Muslims that have voted for me. Majority haven't. That's all right. But I know a lot of women that have voted for me for their own personal reasons, because they're happy with the ration, because they're happy, because they got, toilets and avas and whatnot. So the government's job is to sort of deliver equally, which I feel it has been doing. If we're solely talking about uh,
Sure.
my
I
role
hear
as an
you.
MLA, what I
Yeah,
see as an
I hear
MLA.
you. I hear you, and I want to
Yeah.
go back to Zafar Sareshwala because Zafar bhai, that comment actually came from you. So I don't know why we're making Aditi answerable for it. Go ahead, Zafar Sareshwala. You heard what everybody felt about what you said. So pick it up.
See, I'll begin from where Mr. Modi told us in 2003 when we met him. He said, "बोले डेमोक्रेसी में मैं तुम्हारा भी चीफ मिनिस्टर हूं। बोले मुझे जो वोट मिले मेरी पार्टी को, ये 2003 में जब रिसाउंडिंग विक्ट्री थी, बोले मुझे 50% वोट मिले, मुसलमान तो 9% हैं, तो मैं तो सबका चीफ मिनिस्टर हूं यार, मेरे पास आओ तो सही, मैं तुम्हारा भी चीफ मिनिस्टर हूं। अभी जो इलेक्शन हुआ, योगी आदित्यनाथ साहब की पार्टी को यानी बीजेपी को 42% वोट मिले, यानी 58% लोगों ने उनके खिलाफ वोट किया है। उसमें मुसलमान आप ले लो 15% या 16%, तो तब भी 40% हिंदुओं ने उनके खिलाफ वोट किया है। तो ये मुसलमानों को फायरिंग रेंज में लाने की जरूरत ही क्या है? और मैं मुसलमानों को भी ये कहता हूं कि भाई तुम छाती ठोक के आने की क्या जरूरत है? तुम अकेले नहीं हो उनको हराने में या कम वोट नहीं देने में। तो मेरा ये कहना है कि चूंकि अब हो गया है, इलेक्शन हो गया है, गवर्नमेंट बनेगी, तो मुसलमानों को भी एक डायरेक्ट और बहुत बड़ी तादाद में, मैं मीरा जी को मैं कहूंगा, मीरा जी को, कि नहीं, बहुत बड़ी तादाद में सिविल सोसाइटी है यूपी में। मैं तो घूमता हूं और मैं उनसे इल्तिजा करूंगा कि सियासी लोगों को साइड में रखें और वो जाएं और अपनी बातें रखें उनके सामने, क्योंकि आदित्यनाथ साहब जो हैं जब शपथ लेंगे तो वो सबके चीफ मिनिस्टर हैं। तो मैं समझता हूं कि एक हाथ हम बढ़ाएं यानी मुसलमान और एक हाथ वो बढ़ाएं, ठीक है,
Okay,
वोट
let me get
मिलना
let me get Neera
वोट में
Chandok to respond to this. Yeah, let me get Neera Chandok to respond to this, and then I know Yamini has a hand up, and we have to actually start wrapping. Neera Chandok, please respond to Zafar
No,
Sureshwala.
very
Yes.
quickly to Zafar भाई, मैंने प्रोजेक्ट करा है गुजरात के ऊपर, अहमदाबाद के ऊपर, and I know exactly what has happened to civil society. तो आप मेरे से आर्ग्यू मत ही करिए, because we are on opposing sides of the political divide. As far as admiration for East Asia is concerned, the East Asian model, may I remind people that these are police states. They are not democratic states. They are authoritarian states. If you want to follow that model, well, we are in for a terrible time. All I can say is people get ration because that is their fundamental right. We have elected these guys. They have the obligation to provide us with
well before you had Narendra Modi and Yogi Adityanath's faces on ration bags, you had Jayalalitha's faces on ration bags,
You
and
have
no one called it.
Jayalalitha, you have Karunanidhi, you have Andhra Pradesh, what was his name? NTR giving
That's
$2
right.
ka dosa. Baat kya kare? What is this new model of politics they are talking
No,
about?
I'm just saying that we're criticizing this personalization of politics today,
No,
as
I
some of
am
you
criticizing.
But
आप
I'm saying
लोग
it's
culto
existed.
leader मत बनाओ. The leaders should not be cult figures. हमारे प्रतिनिधि हैं, हमारे राजा नहीं हैं.
हमारी वो बात आपकी बिल्कुल ठीक है, लेकिन हमारी राजनीति में से उभर कर एक काउंटर नैरेटिव ऑर्गेनिकली एक दिन आना पड़ेगा अगर बीजेपी को डिफीट करना है.
मुझे नहीं मालूम कहाँ से आएगा.
That's where we
Barkha,
started this
I cannot
conversation.
give you an answer. I'm not a defender of the Congress party. All I can say is society finds its own answers to despotism. और ये आएगा. Anti-CAA revolt हुआ था ना?
Okay.
Young people.
Let me take this to Yamini and
That's
Parth,
all.
and then I'll give. Okay, ma'am. Yamini, go ahead. Yamini, go ahead.
I think that we can't paper over the fact that even though there's a after every election there's a lot of talk about sabka haath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas. It's been consistent narratives for the last 7 years. It emerges in different ways and forms. You don't need more evidence than the fact that you had a Muslim consolidation behind the Samajwadi Party and not behind the BJP. You do not need to take away from the fact that the only reason we have more Muslim representation in the Legislative Assembly today is because there is a Samajwadi Party wins, not from the BJP. This polarization in our elected representation, this polarization of our electoral choices is a reminder of how deeply fractious our politics is, how deeply fractious a particularly significant population of our democracy feels, that and the extent to which this is creating polarized political choices. It tells you that the narrative of sabka vishwas, sabka vikas is not playing out in the everyday life of governance. I don't think we need more evidence for that. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the politician that says Abba Jan, that calls a certain community termites, that references Pakistan in the middle of an election, if they genuinely want to believe in the ideals of our constitution, to bridge this gap. I have not yet seen any evidence of that gap being bridged. It is a vulnerable population that is saying it is now our responsibility. As a Hindu woman, I will say it is not the responsibility of the vulnerable population. It is the responsibility of all of us as the citizens of India and our politicians to bridge that gap.
Okay, I'm going to give concluding comments to Parth, Zafar Sureshwala, and Aditi in that order. Parth, I want you to turn your lens on 2024. And I think that, we can all keep arguing amongst ourselves and feeling passionately this side or that side, but the election has its own logic, process, and so on, right? So just unmute yourself before you respond. But what are you picking up on how the Prime Minister is perceived and how the opposition is perceived?
As I said before, the Prime Minister, I don't think there's any anti-incumbency against him. The opposition, and largely over the past few years, at least, I mean, I'm probably the least experienced person on this panel, but over the past few years, when I've seen elections, largely they've been presidential. And when it comes to general elections, people are looking at who's going to sit in Delhi. And in that sense, as long as they don't see a credible alternative who can replace Modi in the center. Of course, there are other things that fall in place. You need cadre, you need You need a
And, and,
sustained.
and on your screen right now, you're seeing a win of a newbie party, still relatively newbie party that has its own lessons, the Aam Aadmi Party. But sorry, go ahead, complete your point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, as long as there's no credible alternative to, and this is something that I have picked up from the ground. It's not my opinion. From in my opinion, people have started looking more and more towards who's going to sit in Delhi, and they don't see any credible alternative right now. So as I said before, regardless of what had happened in these elections, I would have still said Modi is the best. Modi is best placed
To win to win
retain power in
2024.
2022. Yeah.
And that would be my feedback from travels as well. Zafar Sadeshwala. Zafar bhai.
Barkha, yes, I accept what Parth is saying. Because yes, you mentioned about the problems, COVID, क्या हुआ हमारे सबके सामने है, जो कुछ भी हुआ, लेकिन लोग ये देखना चाहते हैं कि ठीक है, इसके मुकाबले में आपके पास क्या है, और वो मुकाबिल ऑपोजिशन नहीं दे पाया. और नरेंद्र मोदी साहब जो हैं, वो इनका इक्का है, हुक्म का इक्का जिसको कहते हैं, वो बीजेपी का है और आइंदा भी रहेगा. और मैं समझता हूं कि 2024 में क्या होगा वो अलग चीज है, लेकिन वो पोजीशन ऑफ स्ट्रेंथ में ऑलरेडी है और बीजेपी एक पोजीशन ऑफ स्ट्रेंथ में है, तो वो होगा. और मैं एक और बात आखिर में कहूंगा कि ठीक है, इलेक्शन हो गया है, अब जो चीज है, अब इसको लेकर आगे चलने की जरूरत है.
Okay, Aditi, can I ask you a last question? You've seen life from both sides of the trenches. You've been with the Congress. Your family has had a, your father has been in politics for multiple times. How would you say the political culture is different? I think for people who've seen both parties, that would be a very interesting thing to find out.
I think, first and foremost, me being a young person, a young leader, the most impressive thing about the Bharatiya Janata Party is just how disciplined they are. I've seen some top-notch leaders, I'm not going to take names, or chunav ke time, they'd be sitting in their tiny little cubicles, haath se ek parcha bharna, doing all the work themselves. I've seen top leadership stay in rooms, maybe not much bigger than my bathroom, frankly, like yay big, staying in those tiny rooms, in their party karyalayas, in their headquarters, in even for that matter, even the in the RSS headquarters, tiny rooms with very, very little vyavastha, staying for months at an end, working for their party. So the kind of discipline, the kind of diligence, the kind of hard work the BJP puts in, me being a young person and being just an admirer of hard work, I really am from that generation ki mehnat se sab kuch mil sakta hai, sab kuch munasib hai, and I see that, and it's just absolutely inspiring, Barkha, and you can't beat hard work, I feel, at the end of the day. And dusre haath pe I've seen the Congress culture, jahan matlab सबके नाम के आगे X लिखा है, तब भी उनसे अपॉइंटमेंट मिलने में महीने लग जाते थे, be it ex-MPs, be it ex-MLAs, be it God knows who. So the working culture, forget everything else, forget about the politics part of it. I'm only going to talk about the organizational and management part of it. The BJP is, par none, just the kind of hard work they put in, they're quick on their feet, they're diligent, they follow through. Every sort of every demand that I made during election, and nothing, not anything that I needed, any star pracharak and this and that, they listen, they actually listen, they get things done. And I think that kind of just sort of party culture is what has gotten the Bharatiya Janata Party this far. And I'm a huge fan of hard work in general. I'm a huge fan of people that actually work for what they want and go ahead and achieve it. And that is exactly all the things that are lacking in the Congress party. So yeah,
we'll have to leave it there. This program has packed quite a punch. Aditi has won her seat in Sonia Gandhi's Rai Bareli, fighting for the BJP, used to be with the Congress. Aditi Singh, Yamini Iyer, Parth Ahmed, Zafar Sureshwala, Neera Chandok, thank you. There's a lot to unpack here. And I think we have to have a lot of these conversations separately and not club them together, which is how we did a kind of bird's eye view of the election, but a lot to think about. Thank you for joining us, and to our audience. See you tomorrow, same time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.